Hey folks, I'm Gene DellaSala, president of Audioholics, and today we're going to be talking about how to set up an HDTV. We're going to just do a basic video. This is not for the propeller heads that want to check every little spec and get everything perfect, but this basic guide is going to get you about 90% of the way there. Okay, and the way to achieve that is by step one is getting your TV out of torch mode. Okay, most of the time you get these TVs from the box stores, they have the brightness and contrast blasting all the way up, so the TV looks good on a bright show floor. But you bring the TV home, you're not going to be watching TV in those kind of environments, and you're actually reducing the quality of the picture by saturating all that stuff. So we're going to talk about getting the TV out of torch mode. We're going to talk about getting your black levels right. We're going to be talking about turning off all the unnecessary processing that's actually making your picture worse. And we're going to also make sure you get the right aspect ratio. That way people's faces don't look like watermelons and they look like the proper shape of a face. So these 5 or 6 steps that we're going to go over will really help you get there. It'll really improve your picture quality, and it will let you enjoy the HDTV experience that you spent a lot of money on that you may not be getting right now from your current display. So why don't we go set up a Samsung TV as an example, and we're going to use a test disc that we have from Spears Munsil, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay guys, so we're back here. We're with a Samsung display. It's a couple-year-old display, but it's still a relevant HDTV to do a calibration with. So the first thing I would advise you guys is typically when you get these TVs out of the box, all of your contrast and brightness are maxed out to like 100%. Okay. Now, obviously, I went and I calibrated my TV, so in my case, you don't see that here. Obviously, I'm down to 70% on contrast and 52% on brightness. These are the settings that I found in my room worked well based on my lighting and viewing conditions. And you also play with the backlighting as well when you do your calibration, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. So, like I said, the first thing you do is get it out of torch mode. Use a preset. I used movie mode. Usually with the newer TVs, you get 3 or 4 different presets for every input. So keep that in mind when you calibrate, let's say, an HDMI 1 input for your Blu-ray player, and use another HDMI input for, say, a cable box. You're going to have to set different calibrations for each input and for each movie mode, or for each mode on your TV. So always check that. When you get one good setting, I would suggest writing down all those settings on a piece of paper for that input and for whatever mode you chose, and then go into the other HDMI inputs and maybe copy them. But a lot of it also depends on the source as well, because just because you calibrate for a Blu-ray player doesn't mean that same calibration is going to be valid for a cable box. And it's really hard to calibrate for a cable box because we typically don't have test patterns for it. But that goes a little bit beyond the scope of this video. So anyways, we got ourselves out of torch mode. The next step would be to get you out of all of the default settings that these TVs come on, like the picture enhancements. So you go into, let's say, the advanced settings, see what's going on in here. You can see I turned off the black tone, dynamic contrast, shadow detail. All this stuff looks cool on a busy show floor that's bright, and it looks more impressive, but it definitely kills your picture accuracy. So in most cases, I would turn most of these settings off. I think I messed a little bit with flesh tone because I found I got better color accuracy when I did my calibration, but in general, most of the picture enhancement modes are turned off. Okay, and then you've got the motion enhancement mode, which I can't stand personally. It's like the soap opera effect. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, but typically I either turn it off, or in the case of the Samsung display, I think clear is pretty much off. I mean, you barely notice anything. I left it on clear, but if you start putting it on smooth or the higher settings, to me it doesn't look natural. I don't like it. I don't recommend it. Keep it off. So the next step would be now to get our black levels, and that we're going to use our Spears Munsil Blu-ray calibration disc. Now I've got version 1. I believe there's a version 2 out now that probably has more stuff, more available features to it. And you don't even have to use a Spears Munsil. I just like it as a good reference. Monster has a calibration disc. THX has a calibration disc. Use any disc that will help you set your black level. Okay, that's basically getting your brightness and contrast settings correct. That way you view the picture correctly, especially when you're in a dark room. And then you should also have a calibration for when you're in a more lit room as well. So we'll go over some of that now. Let's open up the Spears Munsil disc. Now guys, there's a lot to this disc. I'm not going to go over every feature. Obviously you can go crazy, but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to stick with the basic settings to get your black levels good, okay? So basically I need to step back here. And I don't know why it's not cooperating, but here we go. Setup and evaluation takes you to the screen that you have all your test patterns. In my opinion, on this disc, the most important settings for your contrast ratios and your black levels is the pluged low test and the pluged high. So we'll start with pluged low. It's kind of hard to see with a bright lit room like this, but basically use this to set the black level by adjusting the display brightness control. So you first turn the brightness up until you see all 4 bars, and then you drop it down until you only get the 2 right bars are visible. So if you wanted me to take you through this, basically we go into our menu of our TV, go to the brightness control, whoops. Now mine's set for 52. I'll turn it up a little. You see all the 4 bars there now? You obviously don't want to see all 4 bars. So in the light conditions that we view TV, I found 52 to be the right setting. Now again, guys, if you watch TV at night, I would recommend a calibration for night viewing on one preset, and then a calibration for day viewing on another preset. So go through this process twice, basically, for each type of lighting condition you watch the TV in. Okay, so after we're done with that test, we can go back to the main menu. And then you do the pluged high. Now basically this checks black level with another bright image on the screen, and you're going to go back and forth between pluged low and pluged high to make sure the brightness setting is correct. So just realize anytime you change brightness and contrast, you should go back and rerun some of these tests just to make sure, you know, it's within the ballpark of where you want it to be, which you can see we are now. And we will move on. The next test is contrast. This is a great test. I like this one. You're basically looking at those little rectangles, okay? This is designed to fine-tune the brightness and contrast settings of your display. All the numbered white bars should be visible and distinct from the background. The numbered black bars should be distinct and visible starting at around 17. And the ramp that goes from white to black should not have any extra width, and it should be, you know, pretty proportional. Especially look towards the center, the black strip in the center. And you can kind of tell if a display is clipping here if you don't see this kind of result. Another great test, guys. I recommend doing this. Okay, now we do the dynamic range high, dynamic range low. Again, this is going to be hard to see with this room being so lit, but this determines if the display is reproducing all the levels above reference, white up until peak white. And basically what you're looking for here is all the bars except the brightest one should be visible. If not, adjust the contrast control until your display brightness bars just barely fades into the background. Okay, so now we go into our menu. Oops. Keep doing that. So my contrast is set at 70, but you can see what happens when I start cranking it up. Not good. You see, you're losing all that detail now. This is how the TV normally is when you get it out of the box. So we don't want that. Now, of course, manipulating these settings is going to change your pluged low and pluged high a little bit. It could. So you might want to go back and just look at that and see if it's still within the ballpark. I don't mind if I see more than the 2 bars on the pluged test, because typically My room is always a little brighter than I do my calibration for anyways, because someone turns a kitchen light on or whatever. So it's always good to have a little bit higher settings on the brightness and contrast than too low, and then you can't see anything. Okay, so now let's go to the dynamic range low test. And basically, this checks if all the range possible in the video signal is being sent to the display. Adjust the brightness control until until bars 18 and above are clearly visible and bar 17 is barely visible. Again, this is hard to see right now. I can go into the brightness and show you. Bear with me, guys. We're at 52. Let me show you so you can see the bars when it's turned all the way up. So you see all the bars there. Obviously you want to see it starting at 17. So we'll go back to 52 where I had it. Oops. There we go. Exit. And that's set. Now another test I like to do is the clipping test. This one's a little tough on some displays because no matter how you change your settings, you might not get the result you're looking for. But this pattern is designed to show clipping of the peaks in the Luma and RGB channels. If the patterns are solid with no visible steps, the display is clipping. You can see we're actually pretty good here. You could see little squares inside the big squares there, so we're not clipping. But anyways, try lowering the contrast control to resolve this. But like I said, some displays you might not resolve it. I've seen projectors where no matter what I did, even if I went into the gamma settings, I still couldn't get it perfect. So it's a good thing to look at, but don't lose any sleep over it if you can't get it perfect. Now sharpness control is next. Typically what I tell people is turn your sharpness almost all the way down, because sharpness, and in most displays, sharpness doesn't even do anything, believe it or not. It's kind of like one of those feel-good buttons you think you need, but you really don't. But anyways, on this test, you want to set the control just below the point where artifacts begin showing up on the test pattern. And I'll see if I can produce some artifacts by boosting it here. But like I said, some displays, the sharpness control almost does nothing. We're at 17 on our display. Let's see if we could get this to mess up. Yeah, you see it's now you're losing definition in the horizontal and diagonal lines, and the middle is getting all messed up as well. Again, torch mode, this is usually cranked all the way up. So we don't want that. We'll go back to where we had it. And you know, this is going to really improve your picture on like your cable boxes and stuff. A lot of times you get channels that look grainy, and a lot of times your sharpness control is turned up too high. So check that, guys. Make sure you're not doing that. And then, you know, I want to go over one more thing. If you're running front projecting, a front projector system, this is kind of important. This is how I set up my projectors. I go to pixel cropping, if I could find that. I'm sorry, image cropping. Now, here's what you want to do. When you're setting up a front projection system, you have the ability of adjusting the horizontal, vertical, and zoom on to fit your screen. On a fixed panel display like the Samsung, you really don't have that much of ability, and you're probably not going to crop a whole lot of pixels. So basically, you want to make sure you can see the full rectangles. When you get to the point where you're at the edge of the screen and you're missing that vertical line, that means you're cropping a pixel. And in our case, you can see we're actually doing pretty good here. I don't think we're cropping any pixels except for maybe the last couple. Actually, we're a little, the display's a little zoomed in. We're doing pretty good. Like I said, you want to minimize it. I've set up projector systems where I've only cropped maybe 5 or 6 pixels in either direction. And if you're not doing that, that just means you're overshooting the image over the screen and you're losing some of that image. So just be careful with that. It's good to check that. And now we'll go on to geometry. Don't worry guys, we're not going to be doing SOHCAHTOA. Geometry is basically making sure your aspect ratios are all set up right. And you can see that I'm actually making circles. They don't look like ovals. You got to go into your TV and make sure you have that set right. Make sure you have it set for 16:9 since you are using a 16:9 TV. And usually you could find that stuff, I'm imagining, in the advanced picture mode. Of course, it's probably buried somewhere and I'm not going to find it, but oh, it's not there. Maybe picture options. Yeah, here it is. Make sure your TV is set for 16:9. And I think there's probably one other setting about stretching a 4:3. I typically stretch 4:3 images to 16:9 so the kids don't complain that they're looking at a stick of chewing gum when they're watching TV. They don't like seeing the black bars. It's up to you how you want to deal with that. But you can see our aspect ratio is good. And I believe there's a separate test for how it does 4:3 images as well on this Spears and Munsil disc. Yeah, there is. And you're probably going to see it stretched in my case. I'm not sure, depending on how I set it. Actually, that looks right. So again, guys, you want circles to look like circles, not ovals. And there's the 16:9 again, which I think we already did. Okay, so next you want to deal with color. Now, you could use the color test here with the blue filter and you can get it pretty close. But ultimately, and I'm sure there's going to be people complaining, there's going to be calibrators that are going to bitch about what I'm going to say, but the reality is I trust my eyes any day over trusting a color meter. Okay? So when you want to really make sure that the color is right, turn on a news channel in high def. Look at the broadcasters, hit pause, mess with your color and your color temperature settings and see what looks most natural to you. Just as long as you're not looking at Donald Trump, because then everything's going to look orange. But look at someone that has a natural face, that doesn't have too much makeup on, and use a couple of different channels. Don't just use one image. And that's really going to go a long way. But let's go through some of the color settings here. You got color bars and HD color bars. Now you got to use the little blue filter when you do this. Basically, I could try to put it over the camera and see what it does. And you should be looking at the bars above and below. And basically, when you do this with the blue filter, you should, let me do this again. Adjust the color and the tint control so that the color bars match the brightness of the white bar beneath them. Check the color temperature settings on your display as well as regular program material, like we said before, to get the most natural flesh tones from people's faces. But this is a good starting point, okay guys? Don't forget to use the blue filter. And I believe there's another one here. Yeah, it's just another pattern for you to check out. And this is where you go into your display. And there's a lot of stuff. Samsung's offer a lot of settings. I would caution you not to get too crazy. Stick with the basics first, unless you really know what you're doing. But you got your color, and your tint controls, and then sometimes they break it out. I'm not sure if this display does that or not, but there are codes to get into the special areas of the display to do that. Now here's what I wanted to talk about with the color tone. And if I can, I will now switch to our cable box. Now, unfortunately on our Samsung display, they put a big box in the middle of the TV, so it makes it really hard to look at the picture when you're making these settings. But I go to a news channel anyways, and I find an image of a person. In this case we have Hillary. I'm not sure that's the most accurate one we'd want to use. Let's see if we can find another program that's better. Okay, not the prettiest mug, but you look at that face, you pause it, go into your menus, and this is where we go into the color temperature settings. Of course, I saw it before and now it's not here. Oh, by the way, there are, this Samsung display does give you some color patterns, some patterns to do your setup. You might want to take a look at that as well. Sometimes they give you patterns to do your contrast ratios. That could be pretty useful. It's not in this menu. Must be in the picture menu. Sorry guys, I don't go into these settings too often. So here we go. We got cool, normal. Normal is usually pretty neutral, and then warm just makes everything too yellow. You can kind of see it looks wrong there. Most Samsung displays I've found are between normal and cool. I think I played around with this a lot and settled on cool. In fact, not to sound sexist or anything, but I trust my wife and my daughter more than myself for setting color. I think sometimes women are more perceptual with color, especially my is an artist and is very attuned to color. So I bring her in, let her look at the color and see if it's accurate. If you've got someone at home that has a keen eye to color, I would recommend doing the same. And that's basically it, guys. So we had 6 steps basically. Turn off all the processing crap in your TV. The motion enhancement, step 1. Step 2, get your TV out of torch mode. You know, get your brightness and contrast levels at reasonable levels. Step 3, make sure you select a preset when you're doing your calibration. Do one calibration for daytime, one calibration for nighttime viewing. And that's really goes into step 1 and 2. When you're doing these changes, make sure you're doing them for presets that you're going to recall later for each input and depending on your viewing conditions. And then step 4 is to use the calibration disc. I use Spears Munsil. There's tons of calibration discs out there. I only use Spears Munsil because it's a reference that I'm familiar with and I think it has a lot of good options, but there's other great options as well. Then you step 5, using the same disc, use the color test patterns, but then fine tune your color to eye. And then step 6, make sure your aspect ratios are correct. You get all these steps down, and I'm telling you, your picture is going to be 90% as good as someone that's doing a professional calibration. It's that good. When you get into these pro calibrations, you're really using a fine-tooth comb. I know videophiles are really into it, but I'm telling you, you can get a great picture just spending 20 or 30 minutes doing what I just showed you. So I hope this helps, guys. I know we're more of an audio channel, but I figured it was time we do a video-based video for once. So let us know your calibration and how you set up your HDTV, and let us know how you like this video. Hit thumbs up below, put your comments, like us, share this on all your social media. We appreciate your feedback and we appreciate your support. And until next time, keep listening, and in our case, keep viewing in high def.